Buwan ng Wika, or Month of Languages this August, entitled More Than 100 Ways to Say, an online forum on the status of Philippine Indigenous languages, a Buwan ng Wika project. This event is co-organized by the Department of Foreign Affairs, Office of Public and Cultural Diplomacy, and the Philippine National Commission for UNESCO. I am Lindsay Barrientos, and I will be your moderator for today's forum. This event aims to facilitate a timely discussion among experts, practitioners, educators, and students on the state of Indigenous languages in the Philippines. The forum also intends to promote linguistic diversity and multilingualism in the context of the International Decade of Indigenous Language 2022 to 2032. To officially begin our program, let's welcome DFA Office of Public and Cultural Diplomacy Assistant Secretary Eduardo Martin R. Meñas for the opening remarks.
To our esteemed resource speakers, panelists, and viewers worldwide, and participants from our 94 Philippine Foreign Service posts, magandang araw sa inyong lahat, naimbag nga bigat yo amin, marhay na aldaw sa indogabos, maayong buntag kaninyong tanan. I am Assistant Secretary Eduardo R. Meñas from the Department of Foreign Affairs, Office of Public and Cultural Diplomacy, and I just greeted you in 4 out of the 8 most widely spoken languages in the Philippines, Tagalog, Ilocano, Bicolano, and Cebuano, respectively. This August, the Buwan ng Wikang Pambansa, or the National Language Month, is celebrated in the Philippines with the theme, Filipino at mga katutubong wika, kasangkapan sa pagtuklas at paglikha, roughly translated in English as Filipino and Indigenous languages, tools of discovery and creation. An essential part of this celebration is an acknowledgement and appreciation of the diverse culture of the country, especially its rich linguistic heritage. You may be wondering why we're conversing in English, so my apologies to my fellow Filipinos, but since this webinar is for a global audience, we will be conducting the session in English, which is also one of the Philippines' national languages. Based on studies, there are 183 living languages in the Philippines, 175 of which are indigenous and 8 are non-indigenous. Also, the Philippines ranks 12th worldwide among the countries with the most number of spoken languages. This fact attests to the country's vast linguistic landscape and complements the colorful history and archipelagic geography of the Philippines, a country with 7,641 islands. It is sad to note, however, that 4 of the 175 indigenous languages are already considered extinct by UNESCO. These languages are the following: Dikamay Agta, Katabaga, Tayabas Aita, and Villaviciosa Agta. Globally, estimates suggest that at least 50% of today's spoken languages will be extinct or seriously endangered by the year 2100, while there are claims that it will be around 90 to 95% by the end of this century. There are efforts to address this issue. The United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution in 2019 proclaiming 2022 to 2032 as a decade of the indigenous languages, based on a recommendation by the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. The proclamation of the IDIL 2022-2032 is a key outcome of the 2019 International Year of Indigenous Languages. Locally, there are also initiatives by heritage centers, Philippine universities, and writers groups, among others, to preserve selected Philippine indigenous languages. We hope that this online forum will spark an appreciation of the Philippines' indigenous languages and a recognition of its linguistic heritage. Thus, this webinar on the state of indigenous languages in the Philippines is being conducted to discuss the plight of these languages. Specifically, the webinar aims to achieve the following. 1. Initiate discussion on the state of indigenous languages in the Philippines. 2. Identify possible tracks to contribute to preserving and avoiding the extinction of indigenous languages. And 3. Provide both domestic and multilateral perspectives on current initiatives and programs to preserve indigenous languages in the Philippines. To achieve these three objectives, we are joined by experts from three different agencies: the Commission sa Wikang Filipino, Department of Science and Technology, and the UNESCO Communication and Information Sector, who will share their knowledge and expertise on the issue. Without further ado, I now welcome you all to More Than 100 Ways to Say, an online forum on the status of Philippine indigenous languages. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Secretary Menyes. This forum on PH Indigenous languages is very relevant as we are celebrating Buwan ng Wika, or the Month of Languages in the Philippines, this August. We have invited three esteemed panelists who will share with us valuable information about the status of the Philippines' indigenous languages. They will provide local and multilateral perspectives on the plight of indigenous languages locally and internationally. Our panelists will also identify possible tracks to contribute to preserving and avoiding the extinction of indigenous languages. Together, they will share initiatives and programs and elaborate on the Global Action Plan for the organization of the IDIL 2022 to 2032. At this point, I would like to present our panelists. Our first speaker is Ms. Lourdes Sorilla Hinampas, Chief Language Researcher of Commission sa Wikang Filipino. She took her BA Philippine Studies and MA Filipino Philippine Literature from University of the Philippines, Diliman. She is currently pursuing her PhD Filipino on language planning in the same university. Before she became a full-time cultural worker and government employee, she taught in various universities. At present, she is the Chief Language Researcher of Sangay ng Salita at Gramatika of Commission sa Wikang Filipino. Folk narratives and language endangerment and revitalization are among her research interests. Ms. Hinampas will speak on updates on partnership with NCIP to protect the Filipino and other Philippine indigenous languages. Ms. Sorilla Hinampas, floor is yours.
Magandang hapon sa lahat. Good afternoon, everyone. So let me share my screen. So, do you see my presentation on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So again, magandang hapon sa lahat. Good afternoon. I am proud to represent our agency to discuss our programs and projects on protecting and preserving Filipino and other Philippine indigenous languages. Also, I will give you updates on our partnership with NCIP in protecting our indigenous languages. Commission on the Filipino Language, or KWF, was established in 1991 by Republic Act 7104. KWF is a replacement for the Institute of Philippine Languages or Linangan ng mga Wika sa Pilipinas that was set up in 1987, which was a replacement of the older Institute of National Language or Surian ng Wikang Pambansa established in 1936. KWF is the official government institution mandated to undertake, coordinate, and promote research for development, propagation, and preservation of Filipino as national language of the Philippines and other Philippine languages. So how many languages are there in the Philippines? So the Philippines is one of the most linguistically diverse countries in the world. Based on KWF research from 2014 to 2016, there are estimated 130 indigenous languages in the Philippines. 36 are endangered, 4 are extinct. Out of 130 languages, there are 11 languages with 1 million population based on 2010 census conducted by Philippine Statistics Authority. So number 1 on the list is Tagalog, followed by Cebuano, Ilocano, Hiligaynon, Bicol, Waray, Kapampangan, Pangasinan, and 3 languages from Mindanao, Maguindanaon, Maranao, Bahasa, Sul. Filipino was declared as national language and as one of the official languages in the Philippines through Article 14, Section 6 of 1987 Constitution. According to KWF resolution in 2013, Filipino is defined as Filipino is the native language being used all over the Philippines as the language of communication, orally as well as written, by native groups from all over the islands. Because it is living language, it is rapidly being enriched through daily use and through other manners of usage in different places and situations and developed in different levels of research and academic discourse, but in an integrative process that gives importance to entries bearing the creative qualities and necessary. The KWF resolution is not just a definition of what Filipino language should be. It also indicates the necessary development of the national language according to the vision of KWF. To further develop Filipino as national language, here are some of the programs that KWF continues to implement. Standardization of the language through Ortograpiyang Pambansa or National Orthography by conducting webinars and seminars for teachers and for government employees as well. By giving awards and contests to encourage the public to use Filipino in research, literature, government offices, and other domains. Publication of books and reference materials. Enrichment of KWF Diksyonaryo ng Filipino, which is now accessible online. So just search kwfdictionario.ph. It is a monolingual dictionary. Gramatikang Filipino. Currently, KWF is developing the Filipino grammar, which will include some features of the Philippine languages. Through these programs, KWF aspires the national language to be an implement of Filipino society. So, according to KWF former chairperson Virgilio S. Almario, more than being the language of everyday conversation, language of instruction, and official language of government, it is necessary for the national language to become an integral part of the Filipino human person in such a manner that it is employed as an implement or kasangkapan in all the needs of Filipino society. One of the pressing issues that we are facing today is the endangerment of languages. This is happening not only in the Philippines but all over the world. According to the International Decade of Indigenous Languages Global Action Plan, the gradual disappearance of languages, particularly indigenous ones, is connected in practice to the structural discrimination to which the speaker have been subjected, to vulnerable situation of the speakers whose actual use of their own languages in everyday life depends on daily reality of their socio-cultural, economic, political, environmental, and demographic situations. In the Philippines, we have 36 endangered languages and 4 extinct languages. So here is the list. The red fonts are languages found in Luzon. Those in blue are in Visayas, and green are in Mindanao. So, as you can see, mostly Aita languages in Luzon and Visayas are now endangered. So the case of Arta. The Arta language in Quirino province is considered critically endangered. In 2015, KWF conducted language documentation in Arta community in Nagtipunan, Quirino. During the time, they still have 11 fluent speakers. In 2021, KWF returned to the community and found out that there were only 10 speakers because one elder had died. Their community has also mixed with the Agta Nagtipunan community. The younger generation are not interested to learn Agta. They learned Agta and other languages spoken in nearby communities. Agta language used as language of instruction in the school in their community, not Arta. To address the problem of language endangerment, we need to protect, revitalize, and promote indigenous languages. Here are some of the programs that KWF are implementing. Number 1 is Dokumentasyong Pang-Wika o language documentation. According to Nicholas Heimelman, a language documentation is a lasting multi-purpose record of a language. Documentation is also essential to gather data to support language revitalization programs. Language documentation is research that uses ethnographic, historical, and linguistic approaches. The language status, language vitality, and the community's perspective on the status of their language are mainly researched by KWF, including their life cycle, community structure, management system, material and non-material culture, economic system, and other domains that the community will allow are also documented. The significance of this project is to document the language and culture of indigenous cultural communities, especially those language is endangered. To validate and determine the linguistic and cultural status of ethno-linguistic groups in the country. To contribute on the scholarship and research about ethno-linguistic groups. To establish language corpus that will be the basis of linguistic research. From 2015 to 2022, KWF documented 40 languages. In 2018, we gave grants to private and public universities to conduct the documentation. Another project is the Bahay Wika, or Languageness and Master Apprentice Language Learning Program. Bahay Wika is a language immersion program for children aged 1 to 4 years old through interaction with native language speakers, usually elders. They also have a teacher that is fluent in their indigenous language. This is an adaptation of the Languageness program with a concept of language immersion and in an environment that includes the family, and the child learns the language naturally. The essence of this program is to give the children intensive exposure to a single language, not only by teaching the language, but by creating an environment in which child will naturally acquire the language. It is considered the most effective models and ways to revive and strengthen the language. Meanwhile, Master Apprentice Language Learning Program is a language program designed on one-on-one language teaching between a master and apprentice. It aims to help younger community members to learn their indigenous language with fluent elders in the community. It does not require a formal pedagogical material because it is designed to align with the traditional learning of the community. For example, the master and apprentice can have their session while doing household chores and working in the field. The significance of these programs is to revitalize endangered languages by launching a language program that will help the community to teach and pass on their indigenous language to new generations and maintain its existence. The first Bahay Wika and MALP was established in Aita Magbukon community in Abukay, Bataan in 2017. Presently, we are on the process of establishing Bahay Wika in Alta in Aurora Province and Inata in Negros Occidental. So next is pagbuo ng ortografiya ng mga wika ng Pilipinas or orthography development. Another way of preserving a language is through codification. KWF, in partnership with Department of Education, Indigenous Cultural Communities or ICCs, and other institutions are also developing orthographies. Orthography is a manual that contains rules on spelling of a specific language. Orthography is used as guide for textbooks, dictionaries, and other publication. It is also one of the requirements of DepEd before they begin the MTB-MLE program of a particular language. To implement these programs, aside from partnership with DepEd in orthography development, we have strong partnership with National Commission on Indigenous People, or NCIP. NCIP is a government agency mandated to protect and promote the interests and well-being of the ICCs and indigenous peoples, with due regard to their beliefs, customs, traditions, and institutions. KWF partnership with NCIP will ensure that KWF follows the ethical standards of conducting research in ICCs, and will guarantee that a free, prior, and informed consent is properly observed before the research or implementation of a program. This year, KWF and NCIP renewed its Memorandum of Agreement. Stated in the MOA, the KWF shall submit to the NCIP the copy of the project proposal, which includes the list of places and languages that will be covered by the validation, documentation, and research. Provide the names of researchers or interviewers who will meet with the indigenous peoples. Provide copies of the questionnaire, surveys, form, or any instrument that will be used for the research. Proceed with the research documentation validation with guidance of the NCIP and its personnel in coordinating with the indigenous peoples. And lastly, provide for the travel expenses and meals of the coordinator and or the identified indigenous peoples who will be the interviewees or informants. Meanwhile, the NCIP shall review interview questionnaires and identify areas for improvement so as not to violate any rights of the indigenous peoples. Provide for site coordinators who may identify the interviewees or informants that are knowledgeable enough in the language or culture subject of the research. Assist the KWF in securing permits from the local governments that have jurisdiction over the area of research. Provide special assistance for obtaining free, prior and informed consent or FPIC through its regional and provincial offices. Through this MOA, which shall have a duration of 5 years, KWF will have an easy access to the community, and hopefully, the processing of FPIC will be streamlined. NCIP also supports the drafting of National Agenda on Endangered Languages, which KWF started in 2019 and finalized last June. This national agenda will be presented to National Congress on Endangered Languages in October 2022. The National Congress on Indigenous Languages objectives are the following. Discuss research programs and activities for the promotion of indigenous languages and other issues affecting language endangerment. Encourage indigenous peoples and community to participate in language and cultural research and documentation, as well as participate in the local language development programs, and encourage researchers and government to support activities related to language development and revitalization. So we are inviting the public to participate in these upcoming events. So these are some of the programs of KWF in terms of preserving our indigenous languages. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Ms. Zarilia Hinampas. Our second panelist is Engineer Nina Liza H. Escorial, Deputy Executive Director of the Department of Science and Technology. Deputy Executive Director Escorial is a graduate of Chemical Engineering at the University of Santo Tomas and has a master's degree in Chemical Engineering from the De La Salle University, Manila. She works closely with the PCI-EERD Executive Director in the formulation, recommendation, and implementation of approved policies, plans, programs, and projects needed for the effective functioning of the Council. To discuss the role of technology in the preservation of Philippine indigenous languages, let's welcome Engineer Escorial.
Hi, magandang hapon and good afternoon. Thank you, Ms. Lindsay. So let me share my screen. Okay. My topic for today is the role of technology in the preservation of Philippine indigenous languages. So first of all, let me greet everyone. DFA Office of the Public Community Diplomacy Assistant Secretary Eduardo Martin Menyes, UNACOM OIC and Deputy Executive Director Lindsay Barrientos, participants from Philippine Foreign Service Post, of course kanina po, the Commission ng Wikang Filipino, friends from DFA, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant afternoon. We thank you for inviting the OSTP shared as you celebrate the International Decade of the Indigenous Languages and the National Language Month. We truly value this opportunity as we share to the public our programs and projects. We hope that today we can inspire you to love our indigenous languages and how technology can help preserve this. Let me begin by sharing first who we are. The OSTP shared is one of the 3 sectoral planning councils of the Department of Science and Technology. We serve as a central agency in the formulation of policies, plans, and programs as well as in the implementation of strategies in the industry, energy, and emerging technology sectors through several science and technology programs. We have a five-fold mandate. First is that R&D support program in which we provide financial support to research projects within our priorities. Second is in terms of human resource and institutional development, wherein we encourage Filipino researchers to be more productive by providing support for disseminating their research output. Also have program on S&T information dissemination and promotion, wherein we facilitate access to and utilization of information and research results. We also support tech transfer and commercialization because we believe that the results of R&D would be put in vain if it is not really fully utilized by the beneficiaries. And of course, the last, which is also very important for us, is policy development and advocacy. We provide research and development support to 21 sectors, generally categorized under industry, energy, emerging technology, and special concerns. Maybe you will wonder where in that area the indigenous languages support will come in. Actually, we're trying to use ICT as well as artificial intelligence in terms of helping preserve our indigenous languages. Another thing is that creative industry is also one of the special concerns under the council. So we would like to look into the culture and how, and of course, also in the presentation of languages as part of the priority under that creative industry. Now, according to the Summer Institute of Linguistics, there are 183 living languages in the Philippines, and almost 96% of which are indigenous. And as mentioned by KWF a while ago, more than 30 or about 36 are already in trouble, while 4 languages are already extinct. So 2 of those are Aita languages, which are the Kanay Alta and the Villa Viciosa Alta. Now, we at the Council recognize that languages are the soul of a culture, and they hold intrinsic value, rich with immense creative effort and tapestries of knowledge. Languages carry tribal knowledge, culture, humor, conversation styles, spiritual, and even traditions. When language speakers decrease dramatically, parts of the language will be lost, and parts of the language will be lost. It must be refashioned into the new language using different forms. Now, recording and archiving audio files or effluent speakers is what is and that is our approach in terms of preservation and coming up with a tool that will provide a foundation for language revitalization. So we also see that providing locals or equipping locals with resources to document these indigenous languages could really help in saving the languages. But saving these languages require an interagency and intergenerational effort on a larger scale, as it required several grassroots level coordination with indigenous communities in offbeat parts of the country. And I see that that is what the KWF is also doing right now, and what PSHRC is starting to do with its initial memorandum of understanding with KWF. Now, we at the DOST PSHRC know that despite this gargantuan task, the role of technology is vital in preserving these languages, as technology will serve as the modern library of these cultural nuggets for future generations. Now, let me share with you some of the projects that we have supported to help in preservation of these natural languages. The first project is, how do I remove the one at the top? The first project is called Marayum. Project Marayum is a community-built, mobile phone-based online web dictionary for Philippine languages. This is developed by a group of researchers from UP Diliman, University of the Philippines, Diliman, and through the projects, they have initially translated 10,000 words in ASI to English. So what they are projecting here is an online dictionary where it will be used in making phrases and sentences. So it's really an online direct dictionary platform for Philippine languages that aims to empower native language speakers to create and curate an online dictionary of their language without needing to have technical expertise in website design, implementation, and maintenance. So the project was commenced to address the need for a collaborative built desktop and mobile phone-based online dictionary. So this website could already be reached through the web. So and they initially have layout for four dictionaries: the ASI English, Cebuano English, Hinaraya English, and Hiligaynon English. Registered communities can contribute to the dictionaries with entries to be reviewed by a group of assigned language experts. And we hope that Marayum can be used by our citizens and expanded for other languages. Now, aside from that digitalization or databasing of languages, we are, starting this year, we have supported the establishment of the Mindanao Natural Language Processing Research and Development Laboratory. This laboratory seeks to optimize and develop tools and applications that can fill the gap of human and machine communication, including human-to-human communication. So it is dubbed as MINA. We call it as MINA. It is being implemented by University of Immaculate Conception in Laboratory, and it is established through our institution development program. It aims to use natural language processing in preservation and protection of languages, and it initially focused on three Mindanao languages: Manobo, Mansaka, and Kalagan. So with the increasing number of endangered languages, it is the goal of this laboratory to intensify research and development works that involve the collection, digitalization, storage, and dissemination of language resources, as well as the development of task-specific trained applications such as machine translation and dialogue system. So the project commits to support all endeavors that will help save and preserve our indigenous languages. We hope that through this laboratory, industry partners will be collaborating to achieve the objectives set forth by this laboratory. Another project that we have supported is the development of a multilingual chatbot for health monitoring of public school teachers. So this one we tried to mix using the chatbot. Students can talk to the healthcare chatbot in Tagalog and Bisaya. So it's a kind of intermediary or intervention system, so that the children and the healthcare providers could interact. So this is just an initial mobile healthcare platform that was developed by the De La Salle University. Another project that we are supporting right now is in terms of using artificial intelligence in analyzing data that are in Filipino. So this is being done by Senti AI, a startup that uses artificial intelligence. So through this project, the proponents will work with De La Salle University to build rich language resources for Filipino and Philippine English. So it will have a dictionary that contains rich semantic information like the Filipino word net proposed in this research. So this is a collaborative undertaking between a private and a R&D and a university. Another type of approach that the DOST or PSHERD is supporting is in terms of putting information such as earthquake, tsunami, and volcano disaster narratives into a language into a language that could be easily understood by the community where it is being used. So like this one, it's a new project under PBOX called DANAS, which documents the disaster narratives of Filipino living in earthquakes, disaster area, and then all this information will be translated into information campaign that uses the different local languages. So those are some of the projects or the type of support or how technology, how we see technology science and technology could help in terms of preservation of language. So every year, the council is coming up with plans and programs to be supported, especially for next year. We will be coming up with the call for proposals for the different sectors that we are helping. So one of which, as I have said, is in terms of this language preservation. So we are looking forward that we could work collaboratively with institutions so that we could address certain gaps in terms of preserving indigenous languages. As we know that this requires a concerted effort from the grassroots level with the scientific community to come up with technologies that preserve IP languages. We also call on the public to educate themselves in these indigenous languages as they're already in that condition, and we need people who speak the languages to come forward and connect with us so we could come up with a solution to preserve the culture. And lastly, we call on other Philippine fellow government agency so that we could work together in coming up with projects that can encourage the use of IP languages. Our lines at the DOST are always open. Please message us at our social media pages if you have something to share and and something that we could collaborate on in terms of preserving indigenous languages in the Philippines. That's all for this afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity to share what the Department of Science and Technology and PSHERT in particular in terms of preserving our indigenous languages. Maraming pong salamat at magandang hapon po.
Thank you, Engineer Escorial. We have come to our third speaker. She is the Advisor for Communication and Information, Universal Access to Information section of UNESCO, Dr. Irmgarda Kasinskate Budeberg. She has more than 20 years of professional experiences in international relations, minority rights, information and communication, social inclusion, and sustainable development. Currently, she coordinates the organization of the International Decade of Indigenous Languages 2022 to 2032 as the immediate outcome of the 2019 International Year of Indigenous Languages. Before joining UNESCO in 2002, she served the government of Lithuania, providing expertise on information society issues in public policies, public administration, and local authorities. She also lectured at the International Center of Knowledge Management of Vilnius University, Lithuania. She holds a PhD doctorate in Communication and Information from Vilnius University, Master's degree in Information Management from Vilnius University, and Bachelor of Arts degree from Vilnius Academy of Arts in Lithuania. As a visiting researcher, she conducted research at Lund University, Helsinki University, and Alvaro Alvar Aalto Helsinki University of Technology. Joining us all the way from France, Dr. Kasinskate Budeberg will speak on the topic Preservation of Philippine Indigenous Languages from an International or Multilateral Perspective. Let's all welcome Dr. Kasinskate Budeberg.
Good morning, everybody. My best greetings from Paris. I know this is afternoon in Philippines, and I'm really happy to welcome all of you and pleased to attend this meeting virtually dedicated to the status of Philippine indigenous languages. I would like to thank the organizers for their leadership in organizing this timely event, as well as fellow participants and panelists and colleagues who are attending this meeting. Let me also thank the Philippine National Commission for UNESCO for the support provided to UNESCO's through the collaboration in promoting International Decade, and the Philippines National Commission and other partners, Commission on the Filipino Language and Department of Science and Technology and Ministry of Foreign Affairs for engagement in International Decade and concrete actions to preserve, revitalize indigenous languages. I would like to begin my short intervention by emphasizing a couple of aspects that I believe are important speaking about languages. First of all, language is a systematic form of communication which takes place in all human domains. It facilitates people's meaningful interactions with each other, enables cultural expressions in a variety of forms, enables intergenerational transmission of centuries-old knowledge, history, and traditions, and contributes to the creation of economic value, which leads to new employment opportunities, sustainable development, and innovation in our societies. Wherefore, UNESCO defends the fundamental human right to use a language of one's choice in all domains of life without fear of discrimination. Language development issues, therefore, should be addressed within a full spectrum of human rights. Secondly, UNESCO has placed at its heart the preservation and revitalization and support to linguistic diversity and multilingualism, both online and offline, as one of important activities and priorities globally. This is done through the monitoring and implementation of the several international normative instruments, such as the recommendation concerning the promotion and use of multilingualism and universal access to cyberspace, which was adopted by UNESCO General Conference in 2003. And I would like to invite the Philippines and other countries here present to submit their national reports on the measures taken to implement this important normative instrument, as it is one of the unique instruments at UN system level, which stresses the importance of working together to eliminate barriers to linguistic diversity online, creating multilingual and open e-content, and developing information literacy and media literacy, digital literacy, and other types of new literacy competencies and capacities at national level. Thirdly, I would like to remind, and already few speakers before me mentioned, that the vast majority of 7,000 languages currently in use around the world are in danger of falling out of use. In this respect, language communities face a series of challenges which directly contribute to the development of certain limitations, appearance of certain limitations in society. Only about 1,400 languages, which is around 27% of those 7,000 languages in use, enjoy legal recognition. And only 140 languages of almost 200 sign languages, which is around 70%, are used as community languages without any legal recognition. This obviously has an impact on the limited presence of most lesser used minority and indigenous languages in public services, and is causing a huge exclusion of those language users at different societal levels. This is why it is essential to ensure what language has a legal status, and appropriate measures can be taken to support those language users. Approximately 4,700 languages, which is roughly 67%, are found within the planet's biodiversity hotspots. Indigenous peoples in particular struggle with deforestation, industrial interventions, monocultural plantations and dams, which cause damage in the traditional lands and negatively impact their livelihood. This brings forth displacement, further marginalization, increased poverty, and decline in their physical and mental health. I would like as well to emphasize that women in our societies play a fundamental role, and they have to be supported, as we are those who ensure that intergenerational transmission of language takes place in our societies. And very often we are those who lack access to healthcare, employment, and participation opportunities in society. The International Decade provides us for a unique opportunity in this regard and offers important entry point for tangible and long-term actions among all stakeholders. The scope of work obviously needed during the International Decade is beyond the capacity of any single nation, country, stakeholder group, generation, scientific discipline, policy framework, or set of actions. This is why we have to work all together in order to make sure that we contribute to the preservation, revitalization, and promotion of indigenous languages. With this view, UNESCO launched several important initiatives, including the establishment of the Global Task Force for making Decade of Action for Indigenous Languages. This Global Task Force was established in 2021, and it is a governing structure which facilitates the implementation of the Global Action Plan, composed of the representatives of member states, indigenous peoples organizations from all social cultural regions, UN colleagues, UN indigenous mechanisms, and many observers who are joining us regularly and discuss the number of important issues related to implementation of action plan. In the preparation of a global action plan, which we published last year in November, it is important contribution as it is the result of an inclusive consultative process which UNESCO carried out with a number of partners around the world, involving hundreds of partners from 99 countries. The Global Action Plan, which I invite you to study and adopt at national level, provides a strategic framework, results framework which includes a common vision and impact statements, number of important assumptions, 4 major outcomes, and 10 thematic outputs with associated 30 major activities. This helps us to plan and elaborate more concrete activities at local level, national and regional levels. The plan also includes guidelines for implementation, monitoring activities, evaluation, and includes elements related to resource mobilization and global communication aspects. So UNESCO encourages all national governments, professional organizations, community-based organizations to adapt this global action plan to local realities in partnership with other partners from public civil society organizations, academic research organizations, those organizations which are mandated to develop language resources, policies, and tools at national level, as well as we invite private sector to localize the action plan in order to produce more practical tools, services for language users. A global communication campaign was also launched by UNESCO earlier this year and is being carried out around the world to enhance the visibility of the decade and ensure outreach of all relevant stakeholders. There are a number of graphical elements designed and made available at your disposal. In conclusion, UNESCO is convinced that International Decade will become a milestone in drawing further and more sustained global attention to the world's indigenous languages, to the issues related to the linguistic diversity and multilingualism. And I invite you to join the Global International Decade community, which now has more than 3,000 members around the world. I invite you to register your events and activities, your projects, share your experience on the dedicated website. Regularly request usage of International Decade logo as a branding tool. Share your resources, whether you have it training or learning materials, materials which were produced for media, sharing through the social media networks, any academic documents which could be related to the promotion and revitalization of indigenous languages. We invite you to share those resources and upload the links on the dedicated website. I also invite you to download the visual identity guidelines templates which we produce for the promotional materials. Those files are freely available to all organizations. And obviously, to learn more about our partnerships and support what we need in order to ensure what our global action plan, what we designed together, would be implemented during the next years. The International Decade will as well catalyze new partnerships, will facilitate international cooperation, and we hope that it will encourage the development of new language policies, comprehensive, including languages as a part of a global holistic approach at national level, stimulating new research, innovation, new language documentation processes, and revitalization efforts. Therefore, we are looking forward to continue working in close collaboration with National Commission of the Philippines and other national organizations to make this truly transformative decade of indigenous languages, and to make sure that we leave no one behind and no one outside by 2032. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Kasinskate Budeberg. And thank you so much. Again, thank you to our three presenters from KWF, DOST, PCIERD, and UNESCO for sharing to us a wealth of information about the Philippine indigenous languages and the ongoing 2022 to 2032 IDIL celebration. I am certain that some of our participants have queries about the concepts and information presented during the discussion. Please send your message via chat, and please mention who among our panelists you are addressing the question. We would be glad to throw your questions to them. So let's see if there are questions right now. Okay, so here's one question to start the ball rolling. And this could be addressed by any of our panelists. The question goes, when we say a language is dying, do we have a standard parameter or measurement for it? And also, for example, when 50% of the total population of a certain indigenous community is no longer using their language, either through speaking or writing, could we say that their language is already dying? We would be glad to hear from you regarding this. Thank you. So maybe we could start from Lourdes. Okay.
Yes. In KWF, we use the language vitality and endangerment tool from UNESCO to identify if the language or what's the status of the language. So based on the factors that the LBE recommends, so basically we use the factor 1, the intergenerational transmission. So for example, if there are only few, for example, if the speakers are in the generation of the parents and up to 60 years old, we put a label of 3 or definitely endangered, or something like that.
Thank you for that, Ma'am Lourdes. Maybe also hear from the perspective of Engineer Escorial, and then also from our guest from UNESCO, Director Budeberg.
Sorry, Lindsay, I think we don't do classification of dying languages.
Okay.
What we do is help support in terms of how to preserve those languages.
Okay, so ma'am, if I understand it right, this will be based also on the data that already exists, like for example, in Commission ng Wikang Filipino, right? And then we based our interventions or programs and projects on those data.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. How about from our international guest, Dr. Kinskate Boulevard and the standards, for example, of what we could see in the UNESCO parameters. Can you share something about it, ma'am?
Yes, thank you very much for this question. I think this is one of the essential questions addressing the language revitalization issues in our societies. And I fully agree with Mrs. Lourdes Zorilla Nampas, what she made a reference to one of the existing frameworks. What I would like to add in this context, we consider what language is alive as long as it is transmitted to the next generation. What there are certain processes in place in communities or societies, what we make sure what language is used by younger generation, what it is transmitted by elders and parents to the next generation. And obviously there are many tools and methodologies in place which could be used and adapted to the local realities. There are a few which were designed by UNESCO, and we are working on a new framework which we would like to share with our member states and professional organizations which work on language assessment issues. But what I would like to as well to stress, what we encourage avoid using the term deaf in terms of language, because we believe these are not the languages which die. Actually, languages never die as long as we are documented. But what it is important to emphasize that these are the language users, and we use the term users, putting together speakers and signers, switching to the other languages for different social, economic, cultural, political reasons. And this is why the International Decade is an important framework, because we want to emphasize what the language endangerment is a very complex issue, but first of all, to draw attention to the human beings. These are the human beings who could continue speaking, signing language if we are supported, if we are empowered, if the language is valuable, or themselves we appreciate centuries-long history which is conveyed through their languages. This is why it is important what the emphasis would be placed on facilitating the intergenerational transmission, work on institutions which are really contributing to the documentation of languages, preparation of resources, different tools and services, but they would make those languages more functional. But the functional usage in societies would be increased across different public domains. And coming back to the global action plan, what we prepared for International Decade, is clearly indicates what we selected 10 thematic outputs. And these are the public domains in which we believe what functional usage of language should be increased, starting from education, ensuring sustainable food systems, empowering using digital tools, through media access to information, to issues related to environment, culture, partnership, employment, and justice, and many other aspects which come together. So this is why probably it is important to pay attention to those issues, speaking about language endangerment. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Irmgarda. And as she said, language will never die as long as we document it, right? So as we can see from the questions, there are a lot of questions, and how I wish we would have that much of time to answer, for our speakers to answer all of that. But as much as we can, we will read the questions, and hopefully we get answers from the speakers where the questions are directed to. Please let me also mention this question from Ms. Abigail Ellie Kirong. She is asking, what can media practitioners and media educators, especially in communication, which usually emphasize English mastery, do to help the situation? So who among our speakers could answer, Ms. Abigail? So maybe we could also give our speakers time to process this one. This is from a media practitioner with an emphasis on English mastery. But Ms. Abigail, let me give them time to get back on that. Let me proceed to another question from Jomil Christian Liza to any of the speakers. One video from Great Big Story features an organization called Wika that preserves languages through video, audio, and print documentation. Can we have the same here in the Philippines for indigenous languages?
Yes, Ms. Lindsay, maybe I would try to answer that one. Actually, our projects on Marayum and even the one on natural language processing aims to do something like that. So for Marayum, for instance, they are really recording how words are really pronounced, how words are delivered by the speakers, and then they're trying to come up with a library and dictionary for that. Maybe that could be expanded to come up with an actual video or an actual something with phonics that people could hear on how it is pronounced. For the natural languages processing, I think that could be something that is doable. But for now, we have some of that in the Marayum, the translation and the dictionary that is already there.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification, Engineer Escorial. This question, one from Ms. Lenny Bugayong, addressed to our speaker from UNESCO. Lenny is from Switzerland, and she said, "We are a group of Filipino mothers trying to promote our heritage language in the Swiss diaspora among third generation. If we try to raise funds among the local government institutions, could we also refer to the Decade of Indigenous Languages? Since Filipino Tagalog is probably not considered an indigenous language." She mentioned by UNICEF, but I'm not sure if it's because there are projects by UN within the UN system or really referring to UNICEF and UNESCO. Dr. Irmgarda, please, can you enlighten us on this?
Yes, thank you. Probably I will as well just first to reply to the question related to about media professionals. It is an important question because media professionals play an important role in society by providing information. And in this case, we would invite media professionals to provide information in lesser used minority languages and indigenous languages, and to produce content which would be reflecting what are the issues, challenges what those language users are facing in society. So content about and content in those indigenous languages would greatly contribute to the promotion and revitalization of languages. And very often we could see it as well when public service broadcasters, in particular those which are representing public interest, we give a voice to communities to be heard, to other members of society to learn about the challenges, or in opposite, brilliant innovations, contributions what we could bring from media and media organizations. We encourage as well those journalists who are with indigenous background to as well contribute to the production of local content, helping to express views, integrating in mainstream media more outlets of context-related issues about indigenous people and aspects in media. And obviously, we encourage as well to develop media and information literacy skills within society. Wherefore, as well, it concerns as well indigenous language users, helping them to really appreciate content, to become an active users and as well as creators of content in those indigenous languages. Now, coming back to the question about the diaspora in Switzerland, as I mentioned during my statement, the International Decade is an international cooperation mechanism. So we invite all stakeholders, whether they would be governments, civil society organizations, as well as community members, actively engage in different actions. And this kind of activity to revitalize or to make sure that the language is transmitted to the younger generation would be presented in an organized manner. So I would invite the community members, first of all, to maybe establish a known plan, a document which would help community members around to understand what you try to achieve. And with such a document, you would be probably able better advocate within local communities, with local governments for the support, presenting your ideas, how you would like to do this, what are the really expected outcomes during the next years. And obviously, you could share this information with us as a long-term activity, which could be registered on the International Decades website. And the reference to International Decade could be made during your different activities related to the resource mobilization or advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Irmgard. So that's 2 questions that were answered. And at this point, we can only accommodate 5 more questions due to time constraints, in as much as we want all these questions to be read. But you may include your email address, please, so that we can still respond to your queries via email. We will parse it through our DFA OPCD and also to be sent to our panelists. So now, this is a question from Jomar Fernandez, and it goes like this. Many are confused. This is for Ms. Hinampas of KWF. Many are confused or are saying that Wikang Filipino is the same as Tagalog. What can you say about this? Are they the same or are they not? Why? If yes, what are your steps towards their differentiation since our constitution mandates Filipino and not Tagalog? Thank you.
Okay. Tagalog is the nucleus of Filipino language. So Tagalog is the basis of the national language, which was stated in 1973 Constitution. But the difference is Filipino language is a living language. As I said earlier, it is rapidly enriched through daily use and through other manners and usage in different places and situations and develop in different levels of research and academic discourse. I also would like to ask that Filipino is also being enriched from other Philippine languages in terms of lexicon and other linguistic features. What KWF is doing to differentiate Filipino from Tagalog is through a research towards the construction of Grammaticam Filipino, or the national grammar, and a national dictionary in Filipino.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Now, we have one from Mr. Roderico Atienza. Good afternoon from Buwan, Nigeria. We've invited to this ongoing forum a diverse group of commentators or participants from Ghana, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, countries in West Africa that are also exceedingly rich linguistic fields. It seems from the KWF's presentation that the Philippines appears to have developed a rich ongoing mapping of all its indigenous languages. A few questions related to this. First, does the KWF's mandate reach all the way to village or barangay level? Second, how cooperative or local government units in helping KWF achieve its objectives? And third, is the Philippines, through the KWF, DOST, or other national government agencies, collaborating or cooperating with our other countries in sharing its expertise with other countries? Wow, those are really a lot of questions, but all very, very important ones.
Okay, so in terms of programs about preservation of indigenous languages, yes, for example, the Bahay Wika program, we are actively coordinating with the local government units of Bataan to implement the program. The LGUs are very cooperative in terms of supporting the project financially and morally. And also, like I said before, we are also establishing another Bahay Wika in other parts of the Philippines, like in Aurora province and in Negros Occidental. We cannot make it if the LGU is not supporting KWF. So yes, they are very supportive in terms of language preservation. I forgot the other question. Sorry.
I think the other question would also pertain to how many government agencies collaborate, for example, so that we could bring it not just at a certain level locally, but really to the grassroots or as far as barangay level, which I think partially, Ma'am, you have answered, and that initiatives that you're doing are also in collaboration with government units, if I'm not.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So maybe we could proceed to the next question from Angelo Galarde. Thank you so much. And for my question, this is his question. I'd like to direct it to any one of our esteemed panelists. Mother tongue has been introduced in the curriculum for basic education. Unfortunately, I think it is only given to grades 1 to 3 pupils. And what happens is just an at the surface appreciation of indigenous languages in our educational system. Some educators have commented that we don't really need a specific subject on indigenous language. We only have to encourage proactively that indigenous language be acknowledged more as a medium for instruction. What is your reaction to this?
Regarding the MTD MLE program, of course, KWF acknowledged the importance of using indigenous language as a medium of instruction. For example, in the communities that we are dealing with, they're not using their language, or they're not teaching their language to their children because they do not see it as important because schools are not using their language. So that is one of the reasons why their language became endangered. No? And then one more thing is by using their mother tongue, we are giving the community to be empowered. No, the community is being empowered using their language in education. So I think it's really a long way to go to perfect the program, but we need to consider that using mother tongue as medium of instruction is very important to indigenous communities and also for inclusivity.
Thank you. That's a good point to raise, ma'am. Now, let's see this question from Dr. Emiliano Sison Jr., from a professor of Madonna University in Nigeria. This is for Engineer Escorial. Thank you in advance. Is there a Filipino community-based app that can be used to translate Indigenous students' Facebook posts to English? Sometimes Google Translate has erotic translation that are either funny, rude, horrible, or nonsensical. If there is none and DOST has a plan to initiate this app, is there a chance for doctors of applied linguistics like me to collaborate? I believe that it can be a solution to combat language endangerment if we can encourage Indigenous students to make FB posts in their language, but they need to be understood by non-Indigenous school stakeholders. So I believe there is a need for the Filipino community-based translation app from Indigenous language to English. Ay, nakamute pa po yata ng Engineer Escorial.
Sorry. In the past, we have attempted to come up with something like something similar to that translation. However, this does not progress, maybe because of some of technicalities on the translation itself. But then with the existence of the natural laboratory processing centers, I think it's something that could be done right now. Although there are already initiatives like, for instance, for the one I mentioned on Senti, they have started doing something like that, but I don't think the app is already available. So they're just enticing people to I mean, app coming from our research and development projects. I'm not aware if they're already available, but there are already like Filipino WordNet that could you use in terms of translating Filipino to English. And then in terms of collaboration, we are really open in collaboration. So as I have said a while ago, we will every year we come up with a focus group discussion, inviting people to participate in our quest for coming up with the right call for proposals, so that when the council, as I have mentioned a while ago, one of the mandate of the council is really to provide support in terms of research and development. So when we say support, it's just not putting up action plans, but we also provide funds so that those projects could be implemented. Now, we already have some pool of experts that we are working right now, but of course, we always welcome collaboration, especially from other institutions or from other countries that could enrich the research and development activities that we are doing. So we welcome collaborations offered by the one that made that questions.
Thank you, Engineer Escorial. Now for our last question, this will be for Dr. Garda and Ma'am Lourdes. This is from Rowani Tupas. May I ask our distinguished speakers to please elaborate on what counts as indigenous languages? I seem to have gotten mixed understanding of these languages. Languages spoken by officially recognized indigenous communities, or all those indigenous or local to a particular country?
Thank you for this question. Maybe I would like just to contribute as well the one which was raised earlier related to mother tongue education as well, because UNESCO is one of the UN agencies which celebrates every year and encourages its member states to use mother tongue as a medium of instruction. And UNESCO is promoting, I would call it trilingual education, where mother tongue is used at basic level educational settings together with national language and international language. But what I would like to emphasize, in addition what it was already said, what education should be seen not only in formal educational settings. We have to extend what language acquisition, learning, teaching takes place not only in the classrooms with teacher, with all respect to teachers and their work, but at the same time when students we leave home, we as well have to access materials, programs, resources with language what we use at school or at home. It has to be as well something that it makes fun, which makes them laughing, which makes them playing, enjoying, communicating with each other. So it is important to as well develop content, and that could bring back to the question of media engagement to produce a content which would be as well edutainment related, where it is from one side teaches students or informs about certain issues in society, but at the same time, this language is used for shows, for theatrical performances, cultural events, and so forth. So the language acquisition continues outside the classroom level, and very often it's actually very important mean and time when the young people either we accept to continue using the language, or we switch to other languages where there is more content, where there is more fun, where there is more opportunities in future engagements, whether it would be political or economic level. And we have to make sure that this language outside as well educational system is useful, is valuable, appreciated, and it's something that we have to cherish and preserve and continue using, because language is alive as long as we use it. If we don't use it, if we don't communicate, if we don't create new content, if we don't engage in meaningful activities using that language, obviously it's very difficult both for educational professionals the same as parents to maintain that language active, especially in the age of plus 10 or more, and then of course goes to the higher educational level. Now, I saw as well an interesting question about use of indigenous languages in tourism industry, and that's probably as well contributes to the same discussion. What language has to be seen as a public good. The management of language is as well should be managed the same way as human resources, financial resources, natural resources in communities. And it has to be seen as a part of one ecosystem, local development of ecosystem, where language is introduced in local economy, cultural life, activities, and that obviously contributes to the promotion of tourism and creating a very, we could see it clearly around the world that there are some regions or communities which integrate language as a part of a cultural economic development, especially in tourism industry. Coming back to the question of indigenous languages and terminology issues, at international level, as you know, international community did not come with one agreed definition, what we mean by indigenous peoples. There are different perspective views and approaches to that, but obviously one which was already shared today by our distinguished moderator, but of course indigenous languages are spoken by indigenous people or those who recognize themselves as indigenous. Obviously that comes together with self-determination issues, and this is why the International Decade invites to draw attention to the critical situation of indigenous languages, but those languages as well could be spoken or used or signed by other individuals of society, starting from most like teachers, translators, interpreters, even public servants. We have plenty of examples when there are mixed families where a family member is learning as well a new language. So it is a part of creating of multilingual a society where indigenous languages have a place. So I would stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Engarda. Ma'am Lourdes,
Ma'am, can you repeat the question? I'm looking the question at the chat box so they can
okay. Ruwani Tupas asked if it's okay to elaborate on what counts as indigenous languages. He seemed to have gotten mixed understanding of these languages. Languages spoken by officially recognized indigenous communities, or all those indigenous or local to a particular country.
For KWF, the definition of indigenous languages are languages spoken by the community in a particular country, or where the for example, it is indigenous when the speakers are endemic or native in a particular country. So, for example, like English is one of the official language of the Philippines, but English is not indigenous language of the Philippines.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for that clarification. And obviously, time is not on our side. All the questions are interesting and valuable, but do share with us your email addresses so that we could still connect with you or share some answers to the questions that were posted that we will be recording. Please accept our apologies if we could not read all the questions. Thank you to our very active participants. Your queries and comments really mean a lot to us. It was indeed an interesting exchange with our esteemed panelists. Of course, this forum is just among the many fruitful discussions and initiatives that have been implemented in the Philippines and internationally. And hopefully, if we have another one, we would see some of you or most of you again, and let's have another lively interaction on this. We are looking forward to more synergies and collaborations with our partner government agencies, international organizations, experts, practitioners, and the academy. We are truly excited to be an active partner of the larger community for the decade of the indigenous languages. At this point, we would like to give our certificates of appreciation to our speakers. And I think we would share the copy of it. Okay, and I read, The Certificate of Appreciation is awarded to Ms. Lourdes Torilla Hinampas, Engineer Nina Liza Escorial, and Dr. Irmgarda Kasinskate Budabert in recognition of their invaluable participation in the online forum More Than 100 Ways to Say, an online forum on the status of Philippine Indigenous languages in celebration of the National Language Month and the International Decade of the Indigenous Languages 2022 to 2032. Signed this 31st day of August 2022 at the Department of Foreign Affairs, Rojas Boulevard, Pasay City, Philippines. Signed, Eduardo Martin R. Meñez, Assistant Secretary, Office of Public and Cultural Diplomacy, Department of Foreign Affairs. To formally end our forum, may we request Director Ralph Vincent Abarquez for the closing remarks.
Thank you very much. Esteemed panelists, honored guests, and participants, I would like to express my most heartfelt thanks to everyone joining today's conversation. This is not something that we get to talk about every day, and this is as good an opportunity as any to face the reality that preserving our heritage takes work and resources. We are glad to be witness to the multi-sectoral approach in keeping our life, which includes the use of technology, as Deputy Executive Director Engineer Escorial detailed in her presentation. Partnering closely with Indigenous peoples is also just as important, as we heard from Chief Language Researcher Zorilia Hinampas earlier. In addition, it was also of great interest to hear an international perspective from Dr. Kasinskite Budabert, as we are definitely not the only country in the world that faces these challenges. I learned a lot today. There are so many takeaways from today's discussions, but for many of us here who are new to these issues, engaging in these conversations is but a first step. As we go about our different jobs and mandates, it is important for us to be aware of what we can do to maintain our culture and individuality in these increasingly globalized times, and that includes our dedication to preserving our languages. And I would like to acknowledge the Cultural Diplomacy Division headed by Director Krapov and assisted by Assistant Director Emilu Felimer, as well as UNICOM headed by OIC Lindsay Barrientos for their hard work in making this event happen. Once again, thank you all, and I hope that the seeds planted today will blossom into good things in the future. Magandang hapon at ikinagagalak kong na sama-sama nating ipinagdiwang ang buwan ng wika. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Director Ralph Vincent Abarquez, and thank you to our colleagues in OPCD. We would like to once again thank our panelists, guests, and viewers from different parts of the world. Truly, language binds the world together. Through language, we communicate, connect, and share our common goals and aspirations. We connect to our roots, and one such way is by learning the status of our Indigenous language. Thank you, everyone. Mabuhay kayong lahat.